Hello guys, welcome to Open Techno. Today I want to show you the Geekom A5 Pro here on the channel, a mini PC that not only focuses on performance, but also stands out for its design and efficiency. This is a mini PC that when you pick it up for the first time, stands out for its great build quality, sturdy construction made of aluminum, and its small size. It is only 11 cm wide and 11 cm long. Then, we have a processor that not only focuses on pure performance, but one of the aspects where it stands out is its low power consumption. This will allow us not only to use less energy, but also to make the heat it generates much easier to manage and cool. This way, the internal fan it has doesn't make excessive noise. And even most of the time, if we're doing regular normal tasks without putting it under heavy workloads, the fan will be completely off, making no noise. I don't want to forget to talk about the multiple connections it has around it, and of course later we'll see what kind of applications this mini PC, the Geekom A5 Pro, is good for. Let's do the more in-depth review and I'll cover all these points for you. Alright, let's start with the design of this mini PC. The first thing that catches our attention when we hold it in our hands is how small and compact it is. Especially compared to other mini PCs we've already seen on the channel and that you might come across online if you're looking for one of these computers. First of all, it's built out of aluminum, which gives it a sturdiness far above other competing computers. It makes it much more solid. In addition, it's very compact. Like I mentioned, it's an 11 centimeters square. And then it's going to feature a design that includes a lot of slots. Let's start with the back. First, we'll have a power input. Well, not a charging port, but a power connector, along with two HDMI ports to connect up to 3 screens. I'll explain later why we can connect the third one through USB-C. We're going to have 2 USB-C ports on the back. We're going to have a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, a USB 3.0, and a USB 2. On the front, we'll find a power button, a headphone jack, and 2 USB 3.0 ports. And one of the standout features of this mini PC is that we have an SD card slot on the right side. Also, you can't see it, but it's going to have Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2. We have several ports that support the power delivery charging standard, such as the 2 USB 3.2 ports, the USB-C ports on the back, and one of the USB-A ports on the front, which we can use, for example, to charge our mobile phone if we want to. Let's dive a little deeper now into the technical features of this Geekom A5 Pro. In this case, we have an AMD processor. It does not use Intel architecture. An AMD processor, a Ryzen 57530U. What does this mean? Well, it means we have a processor, so to speak, that's mid-range, mainly designed to focus on low power consumption. That is, a processor that we could easily find in a laptop designed to consume little energy. But what are we going to achieve with a computer like this if we don't need to save battery? Well, in a small computer like this, what we're mainly going to gain is a lot of performance stability. If we put an Intel i9 in a computer like this, which could be made for a desktop computer, what we're going to find is a very fast computer at specific moments. But when we put it under continuous load, it's going to suffer from overheating problems and, in the end, a loss of performance. In this case, we have a processor that, so to speak, is a bit lower, mid-range, but what it's going to achieve is very prolonged performance stability because the heat it generates is very low. In fact, the power consumption of this processor is about 7 watts at idle, reaching up to around 30 watts when we put it under load, like, for example, when running a game. It's a processor that consists of 6 cores and 12 threads with a speed that ranges between 2.3 and 4.3 gigahertz. However, before I talk about how this computer performs, I wanted to mention that it comes with a Radeon graphics card, also from AMD, with 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and it has a free slot. And in addition, we have a drive that can be either 512 gigs or 1 terabyte, like in this case. And all of this for the price that we'll see at the end. But anyway, what kind of performance does this Ryzen 5 give us inside? Well, here we have to divide it into two scenarios. The scenario where we have someone who uses this computer for office tasks, browsing the internet, even multitasking, because we're going to find 16 gigs of RAM that will let us have 20 tabs open in Google Chrome at the same time, working smoothly without any kind of problem. It's going to be a computer where, for example, we can design things in Photoshop without any problem, and we can manage our advertising campaigns. Or we can even be watching a live video while we're doing some university assignments at the same time. In short, it's a super versatile computer for what would be normal or even intensive use. In fact, the brand tells us that we can get up to 5 years of very good performance without needing to upgrade its internal components. It doesn't mean that after 5 years it's going to break, it just means that, hey, the brand considers that with, so to speak, the features this computer has, for 5 years we won't have any problem doing any kind of everyday task. Now, what happens if, for example, we want to use this computer for video editing, or for example, gaming, casual gamers, because a professional gamer is not going to buy this computer? Well, hey, I've been testing it, and honestly, for example, I installed DaVinci Resolve since we had the SD card slot, copied some videos I recorded with the camera, and started editing them a little bit, changed their color, and exported them, and honestly, it did it with amazing smoothness. It hasn't lagged at any point, it works really well, and both the loading times for the images and the rendering times are good. However, when I tried, for example, some casual games I like, such as Counter-Strike or Fortnite, I found that with this computer, we have to limit it to full HD at most, and lower the graphics a bit until we can get a stable 60 or 70 frames per second. However, it's not a computer where we can play, for example, in full HD with high graphics settings. No, it's a computer that's somewhat limited in terms of graphics performance. In fact, another thing I've been testing, and that really surprised me because it worked very well, was using this computer as a server. In fact, I set up some containers in Docker, which were Ollama and WebUI, to set up our own local AI chatbot without needing internet access. And well, that's a demanding task. It actually requires a lot of computing power. It performed well, it generated the tokens, the words, the sentences correctly, given a bit of time. It's true that, well, the processor was a bit of a bottleneck there. I couldn't give all the resources to Docker, but well, that's my fault. Even with only 50% of the processor, it still performed very well. And I think it's a computer, a mini PC, that really makes sense to buy if, for example, we want to use it as a personal computer, but also if we want to use it as a workstation. Linux server or Windows server? Well, because we can set up some services on it, like this artificial intelligence server, an AI model we can talk to, or for example, even a NAS. Because we have a 2.5 gigabit per second Ethernet, which gives us a very good internet connection. And well, that makes it much more reasonable to use it as a server. In case the features of this computer fall short for us, we won't be able to, for example, upgrade the processor, but we can upgrade the RAM up to 64 gigabytes or the SSD up to a total of 3 terabytes. Also, it's worth mentioning that inside it runs Windows 11, not Windows 11 Pro, which would give us, so to speak, all the features of a professional environment. But anyway, we already have a consumer operating system installed, which means we don't have to spend more money on a Windows license when we start using this Geekom A5 Pro. When I put a heavy load on this computer, it responded well. Regarding noise and heating, we have a processor that stays around 40 degrees more or less when idle, and goes up to 60 or 65 when we put it under full load, for example, with a game. In this case, it's a computer that surprised me because it dissipates heat very well, and this means the fan inside is practically silent. In fact, if we're, for example, watching a video on YouTube or writing something in Notepad, or just doing everyday tasks, the fan will be completely off and we won't hear it at all. It has an Ice Blast 3.0 cooling system, which, well, is its own internal thing, some heat pipes that, so to speak, redirect the heat and vent it out very effectively. The experience, I'm telling you, is very good, and it's very quiet for the kind of computer it is. And by the way, I almost forgot, it's a computer that you can mount on the back of your monitor using a Visa mount, so it doesn't take up any space at all. And well, now, positive points about this computer. As a positive point, I would mention its size, which is very small, the build quality, and above all, its low power consumption. This means that if we use it as a server or for long periods of time, it will hardly consume any energy at all, unlike a powerful computer. Then, as for the cons, well, I did miss having a bit more GPU power or maybe a processor that's a bit more designed for artificial intelligence nowadays. But the truth is that it has performed really well, and well guys, now we just need to talk about the price. You can get this computer in two configurations, with a 512GB hard drive or with a 1TB hard drive. The 512GB one will cost 500 euros, the 1TB one will cost 600. For me, the 512GB one makes a lot of sense. It's a computer that's really worth it because of its build quality. By the way, I haven't mentioned it, but the brand itself gives us a 3-year warranty, and it won't disappoint you if you want to focus on an efficient computer. If what you want is a super cutting edge, super powerful computer for very specific tasks, you can go for an i9, but I'm telling you, putting an i9 here is like putting a Ferrari engine in a Fiat 500. It doesn't make any sense, and I think this processor makes much more sense because it has a much more prolonged and sustained performance over time. Anyway guys, I hope you liked the video. If you found it interesting, leave a like. Any questions, leave them below in the comments. And with that said, see you in the next video. Goodbye.